Before we can learn anything about this magical ability, the scene transitions to the prince's office, where Petrov is preparing to leave for Longsong Fortress. Before heading out, he pays his respects to the prince and promises that the honeysuckle family is ready to serve him. Petrov also assures the prince that he'll convince his father, and he will definitely listen since he is different than the rest of the elites. The prince is pleased to hear this, while Petrov continues, saying he's witnessed the incredible progress in Border Town. If the new city the prince is aiming to build is as advanced as it seems, the honeysuckle family wouldn't mind joining in, especially if it means they could flourish under the prince's vision. The prince then tells him that his goal is to make every part of Grey Castle a comfortable place for its citizens to live. Petrov bows his head in respect, saying he'll hurry back to the fortress and report this news to his father. The prince reminds Petrov not to forget about the other 4 families and the entire elite class. He promises that any family willing to accept their conditions will be wholeheartedly integrated into the new city. He then instructs Petrov to hold a conference at Longsong Fortress to announce this news to everyone. Petrov is startled by this, but the prince reminds him that he'll be the one delivering this message, as he will take on the role of ambassador. The prince also commends him for doing well in his assignment of recruiting witches, and informs him that the operation will no longer be covert. However, he warns that there are still some people who hold hope for the church, and tasks Petrov with clearing those individuals from the western region. He leaves it in Petrov's hands to figure out how to make it happen. Once Petrov leaves, the prince finally lets out a relaxed yawn and stretches, deciding to take a walk in the garden now that he's done with his office duties. As he steps into the garden, he's immediately startled by the sight of large trees surrounding the area, trees that weren't there before. It feels as if he's standing inside a living organism, with the garden itself almost seeming to breathe. As he walks further in, he spots a cozy bonfire, where Wendy gestures for him to come closer. When he steps inside, he notices other witches gathered there as well. He sits down beside his sister and asks what's going on. Tilly reveals that Sister Leaf's ability has evolved, allowing her to create this entire section of the garden. She has fused with the plants, and everything they see is a part of Sister Leaf herself. The prince is shocked and asks if she is still able to return to her human form. That's when Lady Leaf herself speaks up, and she uses the movement of the leaves to create her voice, saying she can return to normal if she deactivates her ability. The prince is amazed by this and asks how she's able to speak using only the leaves. He then wonders if she can hear them talking. Lady Leaf explains that not only can she hear them, but she can also see, smell, and touch anyone within the garden. She can detect every tiny change, the birds building nests, insects crawling on the bark, and the sensation is something she finds incredibly hard to put into words. Using the flow of air within the garden, she gently hands the prince a flower. Nearby, Andrea is cooking some delicious corn, produced by Sister Leaf's power. The prince curiously asks how she achieved such a remarkable ability. Lady Leaf responds that she's not entirely sure. She continued talking with the animals and plants while practicing her abilities, and then one day, they responded to her summons, and perhaps this is what she's always been searching for, a way to combine the forest life forms together. The prince asks what would happen if she tried this in the misty forest. He wonders if it would become a part of her as well. She replies that she's not sure, and even if she could, it would require a long time. She explains that maintaining this form doesn't require much magic, and the forest can even replenish it. However, every time she expands, her consciousness slows down. She struggles to find the right words, but is certain that if she tries to extend her influence over something as vast as the misty forest, she would surely lose her mind. When she first fused with the garden, she felt that her mind wasn't enough, and that struggle made it hard for her to return to normal. However, she doesn't feel that way when she fuses with plants she's controlled before. She just needs to jog her memory, and it works seamlessly. The prince is fascinated by Sister Leaf's ability. While Lily's evolution was on a microscopic scale, Sister Leaf's breakthrough is on a much grander level. If she could eventually control the entire misty forest, no enemy would be able to hide from her. Wendy congratulates Sister Leaf, expressing how glad she is that the Witch Union now has another evolved witch. This means that half of the association's witches have awakened. The prince points out that Agatha would be absolutely shocked if she were here. He then asks about Paper, and we see the timid young witch trying to hide behind Wendy. Wendy reveals to the prince that Paper's abilities need attention too, as there's something odd about them that they need to figure out. Wendy then snaps her fingers, and 2 cabbages fall from the tree. She picks one up and reveals to the prince that she's teaching Paper how to cycle her magic so she can use it consistently, just like he taught her in the beginning. She explains that Paper's control isn't exactly precise yet, but she's making progress. Wendy opens a hole in the thick woods that are blocking the cold and makes the cabbage she's holding freezing cold. Afterwards, she instructs the little girl to use her abilities on it. As Paper focuses her magic, the snow on the cabbage begins to melt. One of the witches wonders if she's speeding up time, But the prince observes that time is just a concept humans created for measurement. It doesn't actually exist, so he's not sure how paper is creating that effect. Wendy then ties a rock to a rope and lets it hang from a branch. When Paper uses her ability on it, the rock starts to vibrate frantically. This observation makes Wendy think that if Paper's abilities were related to time, the rock would be swinging slow instead. That's when the prince's mind clicks with the realization that she's not actually affecting time. Instead, she's influencing the movement of atoms, and her magic can either slow them down or speed them up, which results in water freezing or melting. Of course, Paper doesn't really understand the science behind her magic, but she uses it based on her feelings. She thinks her magic doesn't affect other things much other than water, because some changes take time, like when things rust. The prince believes her magic is like a natural helper that speeds up reactions. When he gets back in his office, he thinks that once Paper gets better at controlling her magic, they can make their chemical work even better. They're already making a lot of important acids, and they need to improve their explosives. If they can produce more ammunition, Bordertown will easily be able to get new repeating rifles. Suddenly, the prince nearly chokes on his tea when he hears a loud bang outside. Nightingale rushes to go outside, insisting there must be a demon, but the prince warns her to be careful. She reassures him that there's nothing to worry about since they can't touch her once she's in the mist. The prince understands why Nightingale is so eager to go outside. The witches have been feeling cooped up all day because of the winter, especially the battle witches Tilly brought. They've been waiting all day for hybrid demons to fight. He can tell that Andrea, Ash, and Nightingale all want to show off their strength to each other. However, he thinks it would be great if they were this enthusiastic about studying instead. Still, he's glad they have their own kind of fun, especially since support witches don't have that luxury. This is why he's planning to work on a new project to create some fun activities for everyone. Soraya enters the scene, and it looks like she has been called by the prince. He asks her if she's free, and she replies that she's not. A few workers have been going to the factory, so she finished painting the layers in only half a day. Otherwise, she helps Kyle with crafting those metal boxes. She adds that she enjoys her life now much more than during her days in the association in the mountains, and is really happy that her abilities are helping everyone. The prince explains that he called her to help him design some new playing cards. He believes all the witches would appreciate a new pastime since the rules for the previous game were quite simple, and the game would be over quickly. He starts designing the playing cards and gives Soraya a basic idea of how they should look. He explains that there will be 4 suits and 13 ranks, with the last 3 ranks being the Jack, Queen, and King. There will also be 2 Joker cards, making a total of 54 cards. Soraya says she understands and will give it a try. Thinking about playing cards reminds the prince of his past life, where playing poker while watching TV was a Chinese New Year tradition. They would play until the firecrackers went off in the morning to welcome the new spring. Unlike traditional mahjong, playing cards are portable and easy to set up, so anyone can play as long as there's a flat surface. There are plenty of ways to play, making it one of the most popular games in the world. He explains that there are lots of games they can play with these cards, but they can start with something simple. He says he'll call Anna over, and she can teach them how to play Do Dizu. The scene transitions to the bustling market of Bordertown, where Eileen is torn about whether or not to buy some meat. Her husband Ferlin explains that every piece of meat is priced by weight, so they can't really get a better deal. He asks if this is because she prefers lean meat, but he reminds her that it won't taste as good if there's not enough fat. Eileen replies that the best cut has a decent balance of both lean and fat, making it suitable for frying in a pan. She knows she has to pay attention to pick the best one. As she's selecting the meat, Ferlin decides to grab a bag of flour. As he walks around, someone calls out his name, and we see that Ferlin is quite popular at the market. I guess this isn't surprising since he was the first knight of the Western region after all. Once it's Ferlin's turn to grab the flour, a little girl greets him over the counter, excitedly telling him that she's an official apprentice and currently working in the agriculture department. Ferlin congratulates her and wishes her good luck, then asks for the bag of flour. A guy quickly brings it over and hands it to Ferlin. The little girl flashes a smile and tells him to visit again later. As Ferlin walks away, he notices Agatha. He's surprised to see her because the clothes she's wearing look familiar, which resemble his family's paintings from the past. He is totally flabbergasted as he thinks if she might be an ancestor of his, and how it's possible for his ancestors to be alive. Right at that moment, Eileen enters the scene and looks annoyed to see him staring at another girl. Ferlin is lost in his thoughts while she tries to grab his attention. Finally, she shouts near his ear, asking what has gotten into him. He says he is fine, but his mind still seems to stuck over her. Later, Ferlin arrives at his family home, and as soon as he enters, he encounters his brother Mason. Mason tells him that he doesn't belong to the Eltec family, and asks why he has returned. The big brother further asks if he needs money for the winter. He says Ferlin can have money, but he better leave as soon as possible. but Ferlin makes it clear that he does not want any money or inheritance privileges. He explains that Prince Roland has employed him as a teacher, and he is very satisfied with his life. Mason raises an eyebrow and asks since when he gained scholarly knowledge and if he's teaching other elites. Ferlin clarifies that he's not teaching elites, but rather commoners. This shocks Mason, who points a finger at his lil bro and asks if that peasant wife of his has muddled his mind. Just then, their father arrives on the scene and says that Eileen isn't any worse than elites. She just lacks their identity. Both sons bow in respect as they see their father, who looks like a big bearded hobo. He mentions that he's heard from the guards that Ferlin has some news, to which Ferlin agrees. His father instructs him to meet in the office. As they walk, their father points out that he saw Eileen in the theater during autumn. He notes that she looked very healthy, and her performance was on par with Miss May. He hopes Ferlin will have an excellent wife in her. That is when we see Agatha's photo, and while Ferlin is looking at her painting, he agrees with his father and mentions that he and Eileen have their own home in Bordertown now. He adds that he's planning to try for a child after the demon months are over this year. The old man then states that the journey must have been tough to come all the way from Bordertown. Once they finally settle in the office, Ferlin reveals to his father that he saw a woman in town who looked identical to their family paintings. Of course, this absolutely boggles the old man's mind. Ferlin further explains that the woman had blue hair and beautiful features. He swears he saw her with his own eyes and wonders if she could be their descendant. The old man dismisses this as impossible. Ferlin then suggests that he must have misunderstood someone. His father agrees, saying it's impossible for her to be a descendant, but she might be the woman in the painting herself. This idea strikes Ferlin as even more ridiculous because how could she possibly be alive after hundreds of years? They then head down to the basement, where his father reminds him that he used to love coming down there when he was young. He would always punish Ferlin for coming here not because he wanted to be harsh, but because the space contains valuable treasures from their ancestors. Ferlin looks at the stones and asks if they are all stones of divine punishment. As he surveys the basement, he notices boxes scattered everywhere and stones of divine punishment all around, which leads him to wonder if the Eltek family has always been this wealthy. Now he's pretty sure that the treasure map he gave to the prince also came from the basement. That's when the old man opens one of the boxes, revealing a ton of magical stones. He explains that every time he sees these stones, he remembers the grim stories passed down by their ancestors. He tells Ferlin that these are valuable stones that only witches can use. According to family lore, their family was founded under the protection of a witch. The first Eltek didn't come from the western region. Rather, they came over the mountains from the wastelands, where witches had built a vast kingdom. But they were attacked by devils from the underworld, and the surviving witches and people fled wherever they could. The founder of their family is a witch named Agatha. She led a group to the stone tower in the misty forest to collect her research, while the rest followed the masses to Grey Castle. He explains that their ancestors were among them, and he was Miss Agatha's butler, who should have gone to the forest with her but faltered and suggested looking after their supplies instead. The witch agreed to his request, but all butlers live and die with their masters, so his actions were no different from betrayal. As a result, he carried his regrets with him when he arrived in the western region. He says the witch never returned, and he severed all ties with the Alliance. Later, he took a few servants and settled in this area, away from the survivors. Ferlin asks if this means his father knew the church was evil from the beginning. The father agrees, saying he was powerless to do anything about it. If any witches appeared in their territory, he would hide them, but he couldn't do anything about the witches in the fortress. His beliefs are different from Duke Rayan's, who hated witches even more than the church did. He mentions that from the last pages of their ancestors' record, they did the same thing, which was hiding witches. Ferlin then asks what makes his father think Agatha might be alive. The father explains that it's only a possibility since witches have many different abilities, but they're unable to have children. That's why it's just an educated guess. He adds that the ancestor wished his descendants would explore the misty forest tower. He notes that his writing is smudged from the passage of time, but his remorse can still be felt with every stroke. Ferlin then asks him if he doesn't want to see Agatha, to which the father replies that there's no need to contact her for now. He states that ancestors don't visit their descendants. Rather, the descendants should seek out their ancestors. He gives Ferlin permission to bring all of the stones with him, saying that if Agatha is indeed who they think she is, then their ancestors' wish will be fulfilled. The scene then transitions to Bordertown, where Prince Roland seems to be working on something new. He announces that anyone who guesses correctly will get an extra serving of ice cream bread. The girls perk up at the mention and start drooling right away. Ash then nonchalantly asks if this provides running water for the room, to which Andrea laughs inwardly, thinking how ridiculous her assumption is. Nightingale also chimes in, stating that this is a crude assumption since typical plumbing doesn't require such a huge pipe, and that Prince isn't inefficient. Andrea perks up to see that Nightingale is thinking along similar lines. Not only that, But Nightingale is also good at combat and has an elite background, and even their hair colors are similar. She has the most elite attitude in the entire Witch Union, and more importantly, she hates Ash. Andrea has no clue why that is the case, but she's sure that the enemy of her enemy is her best friend, which makes Nightingale interesting to her. Ash then asks Nightingale how she can be so sure about her claim, to which Nightingale slips out that she watched Prince draw the blueprints in his office and saw everything he did. The other witches protest, claiming that this is unfair, so Prince declares that Nightingale is out of the game. He then decides to drop a hint and states that these pipes are only a part of a whole system. He then tells them to visit other rooms, as it will make it easier to understand the whole system. Lightning and Maggie decide to explore the other rooms, while Andrea leans closer to Nightingale, asking about what Prince is actually making. She promises to share half of her bread if she wins, but Nightingale responds that she doesn't understand most of it, as the technical stuff sounds like gibberish to her. She adds that Anna is probably the only one who can understand Prince's blueprints just by looking at them, and if she asks her, she will definitely have the answer. It seems that Andrea is hesitant to talk to Anna and decides to just figure things out by herself. She examines the copper pipes installed and notices that they're insulated with metal sheets, likely to prevent direct contact with them. She wonders why they need insulation, considering only a barbarian like Ash would be able to damage these pipes. Then, she looks outside at the large hot water facility where all the pipes are leading. But this just makes her even more confused as she has no clue why the pipes are only transferring hot water. Prince finally announces that from this point onward, the castle's heating system is officially ready to be used. This revelation surprises Ash, while Prince explains that after hot water boils in the stove, steam will travel through the pipes into their rooms with diffusers. As long as the doors and windows are closed, the rooms will quickly heat up. Now they can enjoy springtime warmth while they sleep, and once he perfects the system, he plans to start building them in private residences too. Little Nana feels so warm and cozy that she doesn't even want to go home. Prince then reveals that besides Anna, Soraya, Hummingbird, there is another person who will receive the extra ice cream bread for guessing. And as you can imagine, Tilly will be the lucky winner to have some ice bread who guessed correctly. The next scene transitions to a science seminar hosted by Prince, where he plans to give a lesson on nitrogen extraction. Without diving into the technical details, what's clear is that this process is only possible thanks to Agatha's freezing abilities and Kyle Sichi's efforts. Prince is surprised to see how well Sichi and Agatha are getting along. He initially had thought their blunt personalities would clash and cause chaos in the laboratory. Agatha starts using her magic to cool down the canister, and nitrogen begins to emerge from the nozzle. Anna stands by, melting any ice that forms to keep the process smooth. Kyle Sichi brings out a glass jar that contains the nitrogen, but Lily mentions that she can't see anything. This prompts Prince to ask his first question, which is how can they prove that this gas is different from oxygen? 3 students immediately step up with answers. The first one is Princess Tilly, then Agatha, and lastly, it's Anna. After giving their thorough answers, the 3 women smirk at each other, acknowledging each other's intellect while also showing a subtle competitive tension, as if they are quietly competing to outshine one another. Prince couldn't help but feel proud of the top students. Meanwhile, the less academically inclined ones were clearly struggling to grasp the concepts. Even Barov had no idea what kind of sorcery is this. He turned to Iron Axe, asking if he understood anything, to which Iron Axe replies that he has no clue what is going on, but he sure knows that this all sounds cool to hear. With nitrogen now secured, Prince is thinking ahead to producing nitric oxide, key for making nitric acid, and he knows Anna's skills will be critical in this process. The scene shifts to the town wall, where soldiers are dutifully keeping watch. One of them points out that the witches have arrived, and as they look, they can't help but marvel at how beautiful the witches are. It's a far cry from what the church had led them to believe, and they fed everyone that witches were ugly and terrifying monsters. Right at that moment, they notice some commotion, and as we get a closer look, we spot this giant hybrid monster along with other demon monsters too. The soldiers start to panic, wondering if it's an underworld devil, and they're sure their rifles are just as good as water pistols against this behemoth. Only an artillery team could stop it. With the speak of the devil, the artillery shows up and quickly fires a shell, but it misses its mark, and the monsters keep marching toward the wall. The soldiers decide to shoot the demons within their range, while Ash and Andrea step forward to take the monster head-on. The soldiers glance at the witches, wondering if their magic can even take down those monsters. But before anyone can do anything else, everyone's shocked as a booming voice rings out, and a shell pierces through the big monster's chest, killing the big sucker with just one hit. Some soldiers are absolutely thrilled, while others are left in awe. But pretty soon, they all start hugging each other, celebrating the fact that they literally just took down a devil from the underworld. They all praise the prince while the witches smile, seeing how effortlessly the victory was achieved, all thanks to the prince. Agatha, on the other hand, is losing her bananas as well. She can barely believe that this weapon took down an underworld terror beast with just one hit. The prince then asks if that's the name of this hybrid demon, and further asks her if she has seen these in the fertile lands as well. Agatha confirms she has definitely seen them before, because they used to spawn in packs. They're incredibly tough for witches to defeat, and even devils struggle against these monstrosities. Many cities and towns were raided by these beasts, but they only appear during the months of demons. She goes on to explain that the arrival of the red moon is when magic is at its peak, and many witches are born during that time. Devils and demons also grow especially powerful then. Agatha adds that she closely studied the history books he gave her, and she calculated that humans should have at least 20 to 50 years until the next red moon, so it's impossible for this monster to appear now. But the prince points out that the monster did appear, asking what that means. Agatha grimly responds that it only means we don't have much time left. She reveals they only have 5 years at best. The prince snickers at this, and Agatha asks if he really thinks that's enough time to prepare. She explains that this pattern held true during the First and Second Divine Wars, but now, time seems to be shrinking, and it could get even worse in the future. He explains that the reason he was snickering is because he thought the red moon would arrive early, maybe even this winter. But according to his 5-year plan, by then, their population and resources will be at a decent level, their tactics will improve, and if they fail in battle, they'll have a retreat strategy to ensure survival. His most important goal right now is to build 2 to 3 industrial cities, grow their population, and sustain their army's firepower, food, and supplies. He emphasizes that people are the heart of their supplies, so boosting education and employment is essential. If they can fill the entire wall with weapons like the one that took down the monster, they might just be able to stop the devils. Agatha then says she finally understands why she is working in the lab. Apparently, she has been contributing in work related to producing cannons. She promises to do her best to provide distilled nitrogen and oxygen as long as the prince can defeat the devils. To this, the prince confidently assures her not to worry. They will definitely win against the devils. As night settles in, we see all the witches gathered around, playing cards, a game the prince recently introduced. It looks like Ash is having a rough time. She keeps losing over and over, which is driving her nuts. They ask Evelyn if she wants to join in, and she asks what the game is about. Andrea explains that it's a gambling game where the person with the most slips on their face wins, and the loser has to give up their ice cream. Evelyn raises an eyebrow and points out that finals are coming up, so why aren't they studying? Andrea shrugs, saying the foundational classes are pretty easy, and she's confident she can ace them without studying a single word. This doesn't surprise Evelyn, considering Andrea is one of the elites, so she has way more knowledge than the average person. Evelyn starts feeling inadequate, thinking about how even Ash and Shavi already know how to read and write while she feels like she herself is at the bottom of the barrel. Evelyn tells them she can't play cards because she needs to study, so they should go ahead and have fun without her. The 3 ladies are confused about what's gotten into her but agree and let her be. Andrea quickly dives back into the game, and they spend the night having fun. The next day arrives, and the first thing we see is Andrea in the examination hall, feeling quite relaxed. She's excited that after today's exam, the first section of their studies will be over, and everyone will get ice cream bread as a celebration. Andrea is especially looking forward to taking Ash's and Shavi's share since they lost to her multiple times in the card game. She can't help but smirk, imagining them handing over their cakes to her. Lady Scroll distributes the exam papers to everyone, and as soon as the test starts, Andrea starts breezing through it, while Ash is startled that the test has started already. As Evelyn struggles with the exam questions, Andrea confidently finishes the first sheet. But when she flips the paper over, she's immediately hit by unexpected questions she never anticipated. All of these dots and lines do not make sense to her at all. She then suddenly remembers that Nightingale is also an elite witch, so she must know the answers. Andrea sneaks a glance at Nightingale, only to be met with a clueless expression. Now even more nervous, Andrea looks over at Evelyn, who is also trying her best to solve these problems. Maggie also seems to know what she's doing. Then she looks over at Ash, and, not surprisingly, Ash is struggling just as much as she is with these baffling questions. Looks like Andrea is totally screwed with this exam. Later, Lady Scroll collects all the tests and brings them to the prince. The prince smiles as he checks the papers, thinking about how fun it can be sometimes. He enjoys seeing the variety of weird answers students come up with, and he can almost feel their pain and anxiety through their writing. Suddenly, Nightingale pops in, demanding to know why Anna didn't have to take the test. The prince casually reveals that Anna didn't need to because she helped write the test questions with Scroll. Nightingale is stunned to hear this, but then she asks about Tilly. Why didn't she have to take the test? The prince explains that Tilly was responsible for reviewing the test beforehand to make sure there weren't any errors, and she aced it with a perfect score. This revelation throws Nightingale even deeper into despair. The prince reflects on the exam results, noting how much the Slumber Island witches have improved. Evelyn and Sylvie both passed, with Evelyn making the most impressive leap, raising her score from 5 to 62. Even though she still scored the lowest of the three, he can see she put in a lot of hard work. However, it's a different story for the three new battle witches, whose scores are all quite low. None of them managed to pass the 50-point mark. He figures it's because they didn't attend most of the classes, and their language skills were particularly lacking compared to other subjects. But Nightingale fares even worse among them. Despite studying with everyone else, her scores are even lower than last time. The prince muses that maybe she's just not cut out for academics. I can't help but think about how Nightingale has one of the most badass abilities among all the witches. I sometimes wonder what her powers might look like if she evolves. Anyway, Prince laments how she barely got anything right on the math and science parts. Her formulas were completely off, but somehow she nearly nailed the multiple choice and true-false questions, which is a mystery Roland couldn't figure out. Later we see Maggie cracking open an egg, and her lucky star shines so bright that she gets 2 yolks from 1 egg. Even Sister Lightning feels a little jealous about that. The next scene transitions to the Holy City, where we find Pope Main in the underground jail. As he approaches one of the cells, he reflects on how the last time he was here, it was to execute the previous king, Wimbledon. This time, though, he's here because of Zero. Once he enters, he asks her how the disciplinary whip feels and hopes she understands what it means to obey him after this. She teasingly asks him if by obey he means her obedience to him specifically, or if he expects her to be courteous to the other archbishops as well. Pope Main makes it clear that she will need to fulfill his commands, and if he needs her to help the other archbishops with their tasks, she'll have to listen to them. She readily agrees, saying she'll do as he says. At that moment, he tells the soldiers to release her handcuffs. Once they're off, he informs her that he has a mission for her and asks her to come with him. He reveals that the months of demons might last for 5 this year, posing a great challenge for the Holy City and even worse for other areas. He wants her and the other pure witches to leave for Grey Castle and assassinate the rebels Timothy and Roland Wimbledon while everything is still chaotic. Zero just snickers faintly, which angers Maine, and he asks her if those whips weren't enough to tame her. Right at that moment, a light begins to shine brightly in her chest, and Maine finds himself transported to the old Holy City, the time when he first became a follower of the church. The fact that Maine landed in this place reveals that it holds the most memorable moments for him, which Zero finds quite fascinating. He asks her why she's crossing the line by using her powers on him, to which Zero simply shrugs and says she's well aware of what she's doing. But she reminds him that since they are in the world of mind, they have more time than they could ever use, and there is something she wants to explain to him slowly. Of course, Maine already knows that this place is a battlefield of souls, where victims fight their invaders within their consciousness. The winner takes all, and the loser takes the fall. It's a rare type of summoning, almost unavoidable without the stone's protection. But even though he's wearing the stone, Maine is frustrated to see that her powers still work on him. Zero snickers and asks him if he's thinking about his stone, explaining that its effectiveness has been erased. She finds it amusing how mortals can't tell the difference between whether the stone they're wearing is still effective or not. Maine grits his teeth when he realizes this must be Isabella's doing. He knew from the start that these two were unreliable, and he's frustrated with himself for not using them to produce divine punishment soldiers when he became pope. Anyway, he asks her when she removed the stone's effectiveness. Zero reminds her that he had locked her behind the bars, so how would she knows? Maine tries to keep his cool and asks her if what she's doing is revenge for him punching her. He reminds her that even if she kills him, the entire Hermes base is surrounded by stones, leaving her nowhere to run. Once he returns to reality, she'll be detected by the divine punishment soldiers and captured. When they interrogate her, she'll realize that the punishment she's gone through is just child's play. Zero snickers and lets him know that she isn't planning to escape. Instead, she wants to take his place and become the pope. Maine calls her way of thinking ridiculous and reminds her that he is the one who is trusted by their followers and the masses. It's funny how she thinks they would recognize her position if she killed him. She then reveals to him that she doesn't have to show herself. She can just be the pope's messenger. O'Brien always stayed in the temple and wore a mask when he went out, so no one would ever notice there was a different pope. But Maine reminds her that she won't be able to hide it. Once the divine punishment soldiers see him missing, she'll be captured right away. He's sure it's not too late to release him, and she will let her off the hook. The girl approaches him and reminds him that once the battle of souls begins, there's no stopping it. Maine gets more annoyed with each ticking second. When he asks her what she exactly wants, she tells him that even giving up would be a wise choice. These words strike Maine hard, because they're exactly what the previous pope had told him. It seems like the former pope already knew this was going to happen. To clear up any lingering doubts, Zero also claims that the previous pope had arranged this battlefield for them. Once it ends, the one who is still alive will become the real ruler of the church. She then tells him not to look too sad because the church was built by the Alliance, and O'Brien did this to give witches a chance at redemption. If he wins, he would acquire her memories and experiences, which is a treasure worth 200 years. Maine asks her what she plans to do with the church if she wins. She laments that it will either be victory or destruction. She then exposes him for the secret orders he had made, but she already knows everything about it. In the midst of battle, Maine sent a shipment of supplies to the ports of Everwinter and ensured the ship's maintenance and wages for the crew, which makes her believe he truly leaves no stone unturned. He literally prepared for his own backup plan while taking the throne in front of so many followers. She states that he lost the belief in victory before God even showed himself, so she asks if he really deserves the smile of God. Maine calls this notion of a smile a complete joke, because if God really cared about them, why would he let humanity lose again and again? Not to mention, the battle against the devils still relies on the divine punishment soldiers in the end. Time is of the essence, so he asks her what she can really change by becoming a pope, reminding her how her brethren lost everything 400 years ago. She quickly raises her sword and declares that witches are just a small group within humanity, and this war will determine their survival as a whole. It requires everyone's participation, whether men, women, old, or young. They will all be glorious warriors on the battlefield, ready to defeat the devils or face extinction. Of course, it doesn't take Maine long to realize that she plans to feed everyone berserk pills, and this wicked woman confirms it with a sinister smile. She explains that if one berserk isn't the same as a divine punishment warrior, then 10 should be enough to take down at least one devil. Since there are plenty of demon beasts roaming about right now, they have a stable supply of pills, and their research might even develop new formulas. In 5 years, she believes the church will have 3 or 4 million pills in stock, and the divine punishment army won't be alone. They will be fighting alongside an entire nation of berserkers. Maine calls her crazy for her twisted way of thinking. A pure witch raised by the church would never say something like this, and he's sure her mind has been corrupted by the infidels. But the girl claims that accepting new knowledge is just part of becoming better, and blending ideas brings progress. With that, she decides they should finally determine who will be the real leader of the church. He quickly shoots an arrow, and she dodges it right away. She calls him foolish for believing that demon-breaking arrows would work against him. She comes crashing down with her sword, leaving Maine disoriented, and makes it clear that this world is hers, and he can't possibly win. But that's when the red mist those devils breathe begins to surround the area, and the lady starts to burn and suffer from it. Pope Maine reveals to her that this mist is a hidden mechanism and is only harmful to magical witches. Once it spreads throughout the entire plaza, she will die over and over, no matter what. The girl snickers at the tactic the Pope has, but she quickly begins to heal herself. She admits that he indeed has some tricks up his sleeve after all. She then tells him that if he had gone to the Holy Library beforehand, perhaps this battle would be even harder for her. But that's just how the Battle of Souls is so much fun. She quickly starts to use wind magic, repelling all of the red mist. This pushes Maine to desperate measures, forcing him to take the berserk pills himself. As soon as he gulps the pills down, Zero also summons a giant shining sword. And once she takes her stance, she almost looks like the former queen of the witches, Alice. That's when she reveals that absorption isn't her only talent. She also values observation and learning. With that, she throws the swords crashing down, and that's how Maine finally meets his end. The knights quickly grab the Pope's robe and put it over her right away, addressing her with the title of Pope. The scene then transitions to the border town castle, where we see Ferlin and his father, Duke Eltec, present. Both father and son are sweating in front of him due to the heat. The prince tells them that they can take off their coats if it's too hot because the castle now has a heating system, making it much warmer inside than outside. He wouldn't want either of them to feel uncomfortable. The both of them take off their warm jackets, and Ferlin inquires more about this heating solution, to which the prince reveals that it's a new way to provide warmth, and it's much more efficient than a fireplace. He then gets back to business and asks both of them if they came looking for Agatha. He tells them that they better take off their stones of divine judgment for the sake of respect if they want to meet her. Once the stones are out of the way, we see that Agatha also arrives in the dining hall right at that moment and asks the prince why he called her. With her usual arrogance, she reminds him that the divine war is about to begin, and that she needs to hurry and focus on weapon production. If it's not urgent, she wants him to just send a message next time. To which the prince tells her that this is quite important, and promptly asks if she remembers when Takia fell 400 years ago. There was a servant group that broke off and followed other survivors to the south of the mountains. Agatha thinks for a moment and agrees that there was, but she asks him why it matters since it's been a long time. That's when Duke Eltec dashes toward her, and both father and son kneel before her. The man reveals that he is a descendant of Cage and asks if she remembers that name, to which she replies that she remembers it because she was the one who named him. She bought 2 servants. One of them was Kraft, who was the leader of the family's patrol guard, and the other was Cage, who was the butler. She throws them a look of disdain as she asks if they're claiming to be descendants of the butler who secretly escaped with the magic stones and research records. The bearded man quickly refutes such intentions, but Agatha doesn't even bother to listen to what they're trying to say. She orders them to leave, stating that she doesn't want to see any of them. With that, she begins to walk away, leaving the 2 of them on the ground, shouting for her to stop. The bearded man even withers on the ground, and right at that moment, Nightingale pops up. The prince asks her what is going on and if she can see anything. Nightingale quickly reports that both of them were telling the truth. It doesn't take the prince long to realize that telling the truth isn't necessarily related to what's happening in reality, which makes him believe that there's something wrong with the family records. The prince then tells the man that he doesn't have to return to Longsong Fortress right away, as he can stay at Ferlin's house and visit their town for a while. He assures them that he will ask them about the details of what happened, so there's a chance that she might finally talk to them. The bearded man acknowledges this and thanks him for it. The prince excitedly asks about the magic stones and records they have brought here. The bearded man reveals that everything is currently in their boat's cargo hold, and there are about 10 chests. The prince is sure that her feelings may soften when she sees her belongings preserved from 400 years ago. Later, all of the chests finally make their way to the Bordertown Castle storeroom. Sylvie takes an observant look and assures them that there doesn't seem to be any danger, so they can open the chests. The prince then tells Agatha that she should listen to Duke Eltec's story. It doesn't matter what her butler did. At least he wanted to return these to their owner. Perhaps it was an effort to repay her for the mistakes they had made. Agatha states that her butler seems to have deceived his descendants and himself. She believes that these people don't owe her anything since witches have lost their power in this era. There's no reason for those who still have power to feel indebted to her or to treat her with any special regard. The prince goes speechless and reluctantly admits that she has a point. However, he still believes that she seems to blame them needlessly. She also agrees that it's unnecessary for her to take out her anger on those descendants, especially since they don't even know what happened back then. The prince then decides to explain this to them personally. He then asks her about these belongings, to which she states that these things don't belong to her, as they are the Scholarly Guild's property. Meanwhile, Tilly opens one of the chests out of curiosity and discovers big shiny stones inside. The prince already knows that these stones were transformed from stones of divine judgment, and a stone of this size would be worth around 300 golden royals. But Agatha reminds him that there is more to that, explaining that magic stones can only be created by chaos beasts, which makes them invaluable, so no amount of money could ever be enough to represent their true worth. Tilly grabs one and asks what kind of stones these are since they don't seem very portable. Agatha explains that they are glowstones. She pours a little magic into one, and the stone begins to shine brightly with a blinding light. The prince is quite excited to see these because they are an excellent source of light before the era of electrical engineering. Anna then asks how these stones were chiseled to different sizes since they were originally stones of divine judgment. It doesn't seem possible that they could have been cut with magic since witches can't go near stone of divine judgment, and a huge natural stone seems to be very resilient, not something that pickaxes could break. Agatha doesn't quite understand what Anna means by huge divine stones, so the prince explains that they are at the bottom of the Bordertown mines, tied to a treasure map that has been passed down through the Eltec family. They also used it to find her laboratory. The lady smiles and agrees that the map was indeed used by the Scholarly Guild to mark the locations of stone veins, prepared for future holy cities. This leaves everyone present feeling a bit clueless. So Agatha further explains that every holy city was built upon veins of divine judgment stones. Besides facilitating research on the relationship between magic and its stones, it was also to prevent conflicts between witches from spreading over large areas. It's similar to the Badlands that border the mountain ranges, what people here call the Plains of Hermes, where the church's holy city is currently located. Tilly thinks that since the church kept the name Holy City, it's even more likely they are the inheritors of the Alliance. Agatha adds that if humanity hadn't suffered such a devastating loss in the last divine war, a holy city would have been built on these northern slopes. The prince, on the other hand, lets out a heavy sigh, relieved that the church didn't build their holy city in the western region. Otherwise, he would have to focus on defenses while trying to expand his industry, and just the thought of it annoys him. Agatha explains that magic stones can't really be manipulated by force. Breaking them down requires a special chemical solution that contains the magical blood of witches or demons. Sylvie gasps in shock upon hearing this. Agatha goes on to clarify that since every magic stone is different, the amount of blood needed can vary. Back in the Holy City, adult witches are required to donate their blood regularly, and since extracted blood quickly loses its magic once it leaves the bodies, it has to be used immediately. The Alliance orders suitable witches to donate blood every 2 to 3 years, and of course, captured demons are used for the same purpose. Anna asks if Agatha has done this too, to which Agatha replies positively, revealing that even the third seat of the Alliance is no exception. Then Sylvie wonders about demons since some hybrid ones seem to have magic. Agatha agrees, saying that's true, but it's only a small amount. They're useful for dealing with fragments, but not the actual veins themselves. Once the stones are cut away, their strength decreases significantly based on their size, and their effective range is reduced too. For example, the stones that mortals carry around can be easily broken with an iron hammer. The prince asks if the scholarly guild has ever found ways to create magic stones other than from chaos beasts. Agatha acknowledges this, saying that there have been witches in the guild who managed to transform stones of divine judgment into regular stones, but that was just removing their magic. They were never able to create even the simplest glowstone. And since Sylvie can detect magic, she can actually see what the stones look like on the inside. Sylvie agrees that she can see, saying it looks like a weak cloud of mist. Agatha explains that the Scholarly Guild once collected statistics from thousands of witches and stones, and found that before Ascension, most magic took the form of mist, swirling powder, or flame. While these details might look similar, they determine countless variations of magic, which is why they believed there were no identical abilities. Then Tilly notices that the light from the stone is getting dimmer. Agatha explains that it's because she infused only a tiny amount of magic into it. Tilly then mentions that she's seen magic stones still glowing in some underwater ruins at the bay. If those ruins were built by her people, that means the stones have been lit for at least hundreds of years, which doesn't make any sense. Tilly wonders if maybe some members of the Alliance visited that place. But Agatha points out that it's quite possible to keep a stone lit for a long time. It just requires the collaboration of 10 or more witches. They can do this through the transfer of magic. Some witches can provide magic for others or swap gathered magic between two people, which means the person who enchanted it wasn't alone. Tilly puts a bit of her magic into the stone, and it starts shining brightly again, leaving her over the moon. The prince mentions that this is still really useful for the castle. Just think about it. The castle can be lit up even at night. Agatha agrees as well, adding that it'll be even better in the laboratory. After all, a candle's open flame is too dangerous. This leaves the prince a bit bewildered, thinking about how an 8-hour workday isn't enough for her, and now she wants to work overtime at night. Anyhow, the prince starts looking through the chests, wondering if the books inside are records of experiments. Agatha pretends to clear her throat to cover up the truth and explains that some of them are the Codex of Principles. Of course, the prince quickly picks up on her tone and asks if there's some secret she's trying to hide. Sylvie then notices something strange about the chests. There seems to be a false bottom that she hadn't seen earlier because she thought it was just a normal gap. Anna eagerly tries to unveil what's hidden beneath the false bottom, and they pull out a box that leaves everyone curious. The prince gets a bit excited, thinking there might be some cool treasure that the Scholarly Guild left for them. He's not too far off with his guess, as Agatha goes absolutely bananas when she spots something called a divine sigil. She frantically looks inside the other chests, wondering if her butler Cage might have stolen it from the Scholarly Guild. The prince gives an awkward smile, thinking maybe a caravan was attacked, and someone entrusted Cage with it. After all, it's been 400 years, so it doesn't really matter where it came from. But he wants to know what this divine sigil actually is. Agatha explains that some magic stones have additional effects when their magic is combined. They can change the nature of magic or provide a boost. This was one of the Scholarly Guild's main research topics. Combined magic stones are called sigils, and divine sigils are the most powerful kind. She also adds that these magic stones all come from high-tier devils, and the entire region of Tequila only had about 3 or 4 of them. Curiously, the prince asks how powerful these things are, to which Agatha replies that she could reduce his castle to pieces in an instant. Of course, that doesn't sit well with the prince, leaving him feeling absolutely anxious. Agatha reassures him that he doesn't need to worry, as it takes an immense amount of magic to activate. The more stones a sigil contains, the harder it is to use. Only the top 2 seats in the Alliance could ever manage something like this. Basically, only transcendent witches can use it, because the way they channel magic is completely different from normal witches. It's like they're constantly training their powers. Once they ascend, their magic will eventually reach its peak. That's when Anna nearly blinds everyone by trying to activate the sigil, and a blinding light floods the area. The light is so intense it shoots out of the castle windows like a laser, and Agatha, on the verge of going blind, yells at Anna to let go. Finally, the light begins to die down, and it turns out Anna had perfect control over it the whole time, while Sylvie, standing nearby, feels like someone just bleached her eyes. Agatha breathes a sigh of relief, and Anna casually mentions that it's actually pretty draining, and she thinks she can only use it twice. Even though she says it offhandedly, everyone knows being able to use it twice is nothing to scoff at. The scene shifts to show our little girl, Paper, hanging her laundry out to dry. Wendy arrives and tells her to get some breakfast. Like any doting mother, she asks the little one if she brushed her teeth and everything, adding that she's going to check really quick. Wendy promptly hugs the girl, and she can tell that Paper is indeed clean through and through. Then she takes Paper's hand, and they walk together toward the dining hall. Once they arrive, we see Lightning and Maggie arguing over who will try using the sigil first. Eventually, Lightning decides to give it a go. As she warms up before starting, Paper asks what they're doing. Wendy explains that her sisters are testing their combat points, which is some weird term the prince came up with, and that they don't have to worry about it. She points to a silver square, telling Paper that it's something the witches from the past left behind about 400 years ago. This is what transcendent witches used to fight, so the prince gave it to her sisters to measure their magic levels. Lightning tries her hardest, but after all that effort, she barely manages to make the sigil shine a little, with only 2 gems lighting up. Maggie feels proud, boasting that she can easily get 2.5 gems to glow. The 2 girls start bickering and playfully arguing in the background, while Wendy asks Paper if she wants to try as well. Wendy quickly adds, though, that it might be too early for her since she hasn't learned how to infuse magic into stones yet, so she probably wouldn't be able to activate the sigil. But it's part of the mandatory curriculum, so they'll be getting glowstones to practice with soon. Suddenly, Paper doubles over, clutching her belly in pain, and says that it feels like her magic is trembling, as if it wants to burst out. Wendy quickly asks if she remembers when she first became a witch. Paper answers that it happened during winter, but she doesn't remember exactly when. Wendy realizes that it's already the end of fall, which means winter is approaching. The closer a witch is to their awakening day, the stronger their magic becomes, which is a sign of the antiphase. She pulls Paper into a comforting hug, reassuring her that antiphase is no longer a life or death matter for the witches of Border Town. The next day, Wendy arrives in the office along with Paper to meet the prince. It looks like Paper has signed all the contract papers, and the prince is glad to see this and reminds her that from this point onward, she's officially a member of the Witch Union. Wendy mentions how amazing Paper was last night, fighting through the pain and staying conscious without giving up. She adds that they had a special team to cheer her on, but it might have been a bit too much for Paper. Paper starts to tear up, saying that's not true. She feels really happy and isn't uncomfortable at all. The prince is glad to hear this, and that's when Wendy notices the book he's reading. The prince explains that it's a translated record of all the sigils that the scholarly guild left behind. It contains all the recipes that the guild found over the course of 200 years. Nightingale then appears, asking him why he finds these sigils so interesting. She reminds him that even though the Witch Kingdom had a bunch of these sigils, they still lost to the devils. The prince admits that he finds them interesting because it's an entirely new horizon for him to explore. He reveals that the documents list countless uses for magic stones and their combinations, but it's like a whole textbook. For example, he can take an echo stone and a marking stone and put them together to create a listening sigil. It seems like whatever the prince just explained went way over their heads. He continues, explaining that according to the book, this listening sigil could stretch up to 3 miles. It might be nothing compared to phones in a world of satellites and signal towers, but it's enough for short-range communication. Nightingale adds that the book says echo stones come from fearsome devils, while marking stones are found in devil camps. She asks him how he plans to get those. The prince reminds her that they already have them. The red stone that Lightning found in the stone tower was an echo stone, and the marking stone is used for tracking sigils. Tilly brought a bunch of them, so they just need to break one down. He then reveals his plan to build a high tower next to the witch building to research and craft Agatha's sigils. Witches and mage towers, he thinks it's all going to be amazing. Later, when he discusses the idea of a mage tower, Agatha finds it ridiculous and calls it unnecessary. She insists that all she needs is a chemistry lab like Kyle's, maybe just a bit more spacious. Besides, she thinks building a tower like that would be troublesome, pointing out that Tequila had towers due to its small size, but they have plenty of land here. The prince sheds a tear of disappointment, muttering that it would have been more thematic. He sighs and reminds her not to worry about the construction. Then he asks if she'd need any other rooms besides a bedroom, office, and apprentice dorms. Agatha replies that if he really wants a tower, then no. Nightingale snickers to see the prince get defeated by Agatha like this. Agatha then explains that they can only build one listening sigil with what they have right now, but if they were to fight devils, they could acquire more. Now that she's mentioned it, the prince reveals there's something written on the last page. Nightingale curiously asks about his findings, but he startles her by asking about her combat points for activating the sigil. Nightingale just shrugs it off nonchalantly, saying it's a secret she can't reveal. The prince notices that she might be embarrassed about Anna's score, which is probably why she doesn't want to share. Anyway, he reveals to them that in this book, the recipe for the stones is unknown, and he's not sure if the scholarly guild didn't write it down for secrecy. But then Agatha chimes in, stating that those stones all come from high-tier devils, and even if it was written, they wouldn't really be able to get them. She can't believe he would think something so precious would just be left sitting around in the lobby. Agatha further explains that sigils might be the connection between different magic stones, but the ingredients required in the process are incredibly complicated. Most importantly, it requires the blood of devils. The prince is absolutely shocked to hear this. Agatha, on the other hand, doubles down on her statement, confirming that it's precisely true and that it requires fresh devil blood. The scholarly guild conducted thousands of experiments while researching the nature of magic, and ultimately concluded that witches, devils, and demons have inherently different magical properties in their flesh and blood. The prince is left in shock after hearing all about flesh and blood. She further drops some truth bombs that the magical properties in witches' blood are used to create divine punishment soldiers. Prince then asks if dead witches can be used, to which Agatha sadly replies that it has to be fresh. This leaves the prince speechless and Nightingale horrified. Agatha continues, explaining that this was the most securely guarded secret of the scholarly guild, and she left the Holy City Tower precisely because of it. She explains that all she knew was that they were mixing the blood of old witches with stones of divine judgment and injecting it into mortals to change their bodies. And as we know, that experiment was likely a success. The prince then asks how much blood it requires, to which Agatha replies that it needs at least half of a witch's blood. This revelation leaves the prince sweating bullets. Agatha further explains that the blood has to come from one person. Otherwise, the magic in the blood will repel each other and inhibit its efficiency. So every experiment resulted in one witch dying. Not only that, but it was also difficult for mortals to withstand the blood. In the beginning, no humans survived, and there were plenty of members who argued that there was no way for mortals to achieve magic at all. But if it weren't for Alice's insistence, this method of divine soldier production would never have succeeded. The prince then adds that now the church has vast armies of divine punishment soldiers, and according to Tilly's report, they have anywhere between 500 to 1,000. Agatha mentions that even if the success rate increased tenfold, it still means a lot of witches were sacrificed. She's sure that the number of old witches would never be enough to mass-produce this many soldiers. It doesn't take long for the prince to realize that the church captured and raised witches to use their fresh blood and create warriors. What annoys him the most is that there were hundreds of witches with unique abilities who were murdered at Hermes, and the church vilified them as satanic beings. Before his head can explode out of sheer frustration, Nightingale places a reassuring hand on his shoulder, helping him calm down. At this point, the prince is convinced that a dangerously foolish organization like this must be destroyed. It does not matter if they are fighting devils or not. He vows to destroy them at all costs. Later that night, we see Wendy stepping out after a refreshing bath. She tells Nightingale to go for a bath as well. However, Wendy finds herself shocked when she sees Nightingale actually studying Natural Sciences 101. It surprises her so much that she loses her grip on her towel and it falls to the floor. Wendy asks her if something happened between her and the prince that led her to study out of the blue. Nightingale then decides to share everything, and the scene transitions to a bit earlier when the prince looks at her dejected face. He asks if she plans to go against the church alone, but Nightingale states that she isn't that foolish. If the church could be toppled by just a single witch, someone would have done it already. The prince explains that the church created divine punishment soldiers to increase its own strength, which means they wouldn't waste powerful witches for blood. Even the mist can't guarantee her safety against those soldiers. The prince wants to handle the church strategically, believing that the best approach will be to launch a steady offense with the First Army once the war officially begins. He assures Nightingale that he's determined to build a new world where witches will be treated as equals to mortals, and their lives will be valued just as any other. Nightingale moves closer with a smile on her face and expresses her confidence that he will make it happen. Back in the present, Nightingale explains that this vision is her motivation for studying. She wants to become stronger, so she can be more useful in the fight against the church. Wendy, meanwhile, is shocked as she realizes that all those nunneries built by the church were really just harvesting centers for fresh blood. She reflects on how if Ash hadn't saved her, she would have shared the same fate as other witches who died at the hands of the church. This revelation fuels Wendy's determination to improve, and she also wants to catch up to her sisters, who are working hard. So she agrees with Nightingale that it's finally time to get stronger. From now on, she will follow the example of her sisters and spend an hour each night learning the prince's knowledge before sleeping. She tells Nightingale they should do their best together. However, it seems that Nightingale has already reached her limit, as she has dozed off already. Well, what can you expect of her? A few days later, we see the prince proudly introducing his new ship to the citizens, claiming it to be one of the best he has created so far. As the ship rolls into the water and lands in the river from the dock, everyone is absolutely amazed to see it floating. This ship was constructed from stone and was completed in just half a month. Word is spreading that even the Plaza billboard is recruiting a captain and crew for it. At that moment, Nightingale appears, asking the prince why he would announce this to the civilians. The prince responds with a confident grin, explaining that it's to showcase their power and boost the morale of the townspeople. He believes this introduction will serve as evidence of their town's massive improvements. In the past, people would have found it hard to believe that a ship made of concrete could float. By exceeding their expectations, the citizens will begin to recognize the progress of their town, which will elevate their attitudes and possibly lead them to believe that anything is possible. He tells Nightingale to think of it as an advertising strategy. A territory's growth will change its citizens' outlook. We then see the redhead with his old friend. The friend comments that even a sailboat would require at least a month to refine its frame, as the wood needs to dry completely before being bent with steam. It's an incredibly difficult process that could never be accomplished in just half a month. The redhead asks his friend how he knows so much about boat construction, to which the old man replies that he used to be a captain. When he was younger, he shipped large amounts of cargo between Seabreeze Town and Clearwater Port. He even traveled to the Bay and the Kingdom of Dawn, but due to unforeseen circumstances, he ended up where he is today. The redhead expresses surprise, saying he never knew this about him. The old man shrugs and says he never asked. He then comments that it seems in just a year or two, the prince has built a fleet capable of sailing through all the rivers of Greycastle. With that said, the old man has also decided to apply for the captain's position. Later, we find ourselves in a forest where Lightning and Maggie are preparing to hunt a wild boar. However, they are soon startled by Lady Leaf, scaring both girls out of their minds. Lightning's face goes pale upon realizing it's Miss Leaf. The girl quickly apologizes and morphs back into her original form, which frightens Lightning even more, though at least it's still better than talking to a tree branch. Maggie tries to bite Sister Leaf and confirms that she has indeed turned into a tree. Lightning asks how she can appear out of nowhere like that, to which Lady Leaf explains that she can appear anywhere in the radius of her control. She wishes to command the entire forest one day, as it will be a great asset to Prince in both defending against demons and collecting resources. However, she admits that she can't nurture it like the castle's garden, as she can only expand her influence a little bit each day. Her vision can jump from one side of the forest to the other, and sometimes she feels even faster than birds. Every inch of land is rich in life. If she follows the roots, she can sense the vibration of animals, wriggling insects, rotting corpses, and tiny paths of water. This all sounds completely bizarre to Maggie, who is quite freaked out by this revelation. But Lightning reminds her that she can literally turn into a devil, which is pretty weird in itself. Sister Leaf then tries to trap the boar by making the bushes sway, and as the boar falls for the bait, it starts to run. Lightning quickly takes her cue, slashing down on the poor creature. After a few cuts, the boar finally collapses, leaving Lightning quite happy with her successful hunt. Excitedly, she decides to drain the boar's blood, recalling that Prince said it would make the meat more delicious. Suddenly, Sister Leaf notices something and quickly mentions that 2 wolves are approaching. She explains that they usually stay deeper in the forest and don't venture out in the winter. As the scene transitions, we see that these wolves are apparently frightened by the arrival of 2 devils. Leaf is terrified and urgently tells both of them to run, revealing that the devils are advancing toward the wall, wearing black iron gauntlets, the same kind of tools used to kill Pepper and the others. She insists they should flee, as these beasts don't seem to bring flying creatures with them. But Lightning steals her resolve, making it clear that she's not going anywhere without putting up a fight. She believes that if they keep running every time they see an enemy, they'll never stand a chance against them. With determination, she pulls out her revolver and states that her father always said that one should always get back up when they fall down, and she adheres to these words and won't run away anymore. She mentions that these devils are just as scary as they look, but they can be killed too. They have a huge weakness that they can't survive without the red mist. Lightning reminds Leaf of how she took down a devil with a crossbow, and Nightingale managed to defeat even more under worse circumstances. Leaf still feels terrified and thinks she should report this to the prince since both Nightingale and Ash have way more experience in killing devils than anyone else around here. But then Lightning starts flying toward the devils, saying they might be gone by the time they get there. It'd be even riskier to let such dangerous enemies roam near the town, and if they leave her detection radius, it would just spell more trouble. Even Hoot seems fired up to take these things on. Leaf asks what Maggie is saying, and Lightning replies that Maggie wants to claw their heads off, flatten them into patties with her wings, and then roast them over a fire to see if they're tasty or not. Jokes aside, they decide it's time to get going. Lightning tells Leaf to immobilize the devils with her vines like she did in the Wastelands, but Leaf hesitates, remembering how everyone got zapped by these creatures back then. Still, she steels her resolve and agrees to do it, but she can only do it temporarily. Lightning winks with a smile, and they shoot off toward the devils, planning to attack from the air since that'll give them the most obscure angle. Plus, they'll be focused on the vines, so it shouldn't be too bothersome. After a quick flight, Maggie spots the devils below. Lightning comes up with a plan and tells Hoot to transform into that big weird bird at half distance while they both split off in opposite directions. They charge at the monsters. If Sister Leaf was right, Lightning is pretty sure the devils should have magic stones in their gauntlets, and their range is about the same as a witch's, roughly 5 meters at best. So, shooting from the sky at 8 meters away should be safe. But just as she's about to make her move, the devils spot her, which sends a wave of terror through Lightning. Right then, vines sprout up from the ground, catching the devils off guard, and Sister Leaf quickly binds them tightly with her vines. Lightning also signals to Maggie to turn into a monster and roar, and Maggie promptly follows the instructions. Lightning quickly lands on the ground, pulls out her revolver, and shoots the monster right in the chest. The monster roars in pain and charges toward her, but Lightning keeps shooting relentlessly. It doesn't seem to stop, though. Finally, with one last shot, Lightning successfully drills a hole right through the monster, causing red mist to leak out in the process. The monster collapses to the ground promptly. Let's not forget about the second devil, who is overpowering poor Maggie. That monster delivers a strong lightning shock with its gauntlet, and the shock is so intense that it renders Hoot unconscious, making her plop onto the ground immediately. As the devil tries to make a run for it, Maggie ends up falling right on top of the dead devil, and that red mist starts to burn her. But Lady Leaf quickly grabs her with her vines and throws her away to save her from the mist.